is 2014, and Call of Duty is going strong, topping the sales charts on Xbox and PS3 with 10 mainline titles and counting. However, it's been over 5 years since COD 4 rejuvenated the formerly World War II franchise by placing it in the modern age, and players are starting to feel fatigued. Every Call of Duty is exactly the same. This is the most common sentiment around the community. And while 2013's COD Ghost still sold well compared to the competition, it was becoming clear that within the franchise, their best titles may be behind them. They needed a change. They needed another COD 4. Bring in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. Sledgehammer Games' first mainline entry into the series. A game meant to push the franchise into the future. Literally, with a fresh setting and all new movement mechanics, among a plethora of sci-fi gadgets and weapons to capitalize on the recent success of Titanfall, it looked like just the kind of change Call of Duty needed if they wanted to remain at the top of the industry. It was a gamble, but did it pay off? Or did this title not only not save Call of Duty's downward spiral, but actually accelerate it? Let's take a look. Quick side note, if you like Call of Duty and you like podcasts, me and my boy Chopper just started our very own called Going Dark, and guess what? It's live on all platforms. It's gonna be in the description. Go give it a listen.
What you're seeing is Advanced Warfare.
The single player campaign, like with most of its time, was pretty good, especially when comparing it to some of the downright awful stories we've seen in the last decade. The premise was a relatively new concept for COD, based around a private military cooperation going rogue and playing the character being caught in the crossfire. This campaign also marks the first time an A-list actor not just voice acted in a Call of Duty title, but even had their character modeled after them, a practice we'd go on to see become the standard in the franchise. While the future setting had already been done 2 years prior back in Black Ops 2, Advanced Warfare's addition of a jetpack made it feel completely different. As with many single-player stories of this era, if you just close your eyes and imagine you're playing a brand new IP unrelated to Call of Duty, you'll find a pretty good sci-fi shooter, full of fun gadgets and unique missions that felt fresh. Like one of the first missions that has you try and fail to save the president, only for it to be a big simulation in training.
Sloppy, Mitchell. You're a dead man.
Or a mission towards the end of the game where your character's robotic arm is disabled, so you have to play through the mission picking up new weapons every time you run out of ammo since you can't reload. That all pales in comparison to how fresh the multiplayer felt though, and that could have been seen as a good thing or a very bad thing. The jetpacks followed players into multiplayer, meaning that double jumping and dashing became core components to how you get around the map and added a new dimension to gunfights. In addition, your tactical grenade slot was replaced with new abilities that you were given each life. These were things like an arm-mounted shield, invisibility, speed boost, and even a short hover ability. Weapon-wise, while there were still plenty of guns that looked like something you could pick up off a battlefield today, there were a small number of laser weapons and other future-themed munitions, like one that printed ammo for you as you played. All these new mechanics completely changed the way we played Call of Duty, in some ways forever. You know that guy jump-shotting around every corner in MW3? Yeah. That wasn't as a big thing before AW. The rest of Advanced Warfare's class system was an upgrade to the Pick 10 system, this time with 13 points, letting you add up to 4 kill streaks onto the class itself. Character customization from Ghost also made a return, but with even more to personalize in the most in-depth alpha system we've ever gotten. And even beyond that, there's a surprisingly large number of brand new features introduced in this game that would go on to become series staples, like the firing range, stim shots, weapon blueprints, and unfortunately, supply drops. Maps were of course designed with these new features in mind, with more complex layouts that incentivize verticality and force you to use your jetpack to get to certain parts of the map. Remakes like Pipeline from COD 4 were widened and had their playable spaces expanded to rooftops, completely changing how they flowed. New modes were also created to complement these new mechanics. There was Uplink, where the objective was to get the ball into the other team's goal like 3D soccer. And Momentum, aka World at War's War Mode, also returned, playing like a tug-of-war match with domination flags. Overall, multiplayer was different. It achieved its goal, but was it too different? The common complaint everyone had went from every COD is the same to this doesn't feel like COD anymore, and the community began getting more and more divided as the year went on. next part of Advanced Warfare's offering was co-op, split into two separate but similar modes. First was Exo Survival, which is exactly what it sounds like. You and your friends fend off waves of human enemies on multiplayer maps, but now those enemies had exosuits. It was pretty bare bones and largely forgotten about, much like MW3's previous attempt at a survival mode. But the second co-op experience that came after launch was significantly more in-depth: Exo Zombies. As the first zombies mode not created by Treyarch, Sledgehammer honestly knocked it out of the park. You get to play as a crew of celebrities ranging from John Bernthal to John Malkovich, fighting off waves of zombies, just like good old round-based Treyarch zombies, complete with Easter eggs, perks, an upgrade station, and a full 4-map DLC season with a story that was actually pretty good. Now that we've laid out everything that Advanced Warfare has to offer, let's take a look at its place in the franchise and its legacy, or lack thereof. It's no surprise that the community in general tends to view the jetpack era as a bit of a stain on the franchise, introducing some of the series' most hated mechanics and monetization models we've ever seen in Call of Duty and beyond. How much of that was actually Advanced Warfare's fault? Like we mentioned, going into the game's release, the community was begging for something new, something bold, something fresh. And that's exactly what we got. And despite the disdain for it now, Sledgehammer's first attempt at advanced movement was actually initially pretty well received by the fan base. In fact, it wasn't until towards the end of the game's life cycle, when Black Ops 3 was announced to also feature jetpacks, that the pitchforks started coming out. In my opinion, if Advanced Warfare wasn't immediately followed up with 2 more jetpack games, this game may have been seen as a fun detour rather than a horseman of the apocalypse. Did Advanced Warfare have its problems? Absolutely. Loot boxes may have been the worst in franchise history, with many post-launch weapons being tied to paid supply drops. Meaning if you wanted a specific new gun, not only did you have to pay for it, but you're actually only paying for a chance to get it. The jetpacks themselves were also polished up in future titles, with the single thrust in any direction being replaced with a more momentum-based stamina bar, making returning to this game years later feel a bit clunky. But a lot of the issues players have with the jetpack era are born from fatigue. After 3 entries firmly planting COD as a sci-fi jetpack shooter, people were sick of it. They were worn out, and the series no longer resembled the thing that they fell in love with. But that's not on AW, or Sledgehammer who developed it. They tried something new in an effort to keep the series from growing stagnant. And did it work? For me, yes. And the fact that they continued the jetpack trend means that enough of the fan base agreed. Advanced Warfare really was that fun little detour they promised. But should they have done 3 jetpack CODs in a row? No, definitely not. The solution? Maybe we bring jetpacks back every 3rd year. In current COD, there's a lot of discourse about each release all feeling the same, much like the talk back in 2013. And this would be the perfect way of correcting that. With a jetpack COD every 3 years, we would get the same injection of fresh gameplay that actually feels different than the previous years, but without the fatigue that followed last time. The previous year's COD could even continue to be supported with maps and weapons during the jetpack years, so everybody wins. The advanced movement fans win, the boots on the ground fans win, and Sledgehammer wins, who clearly have been wanting to make a sequel to Advanced Warfare for nearly a decade. Thank you all for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and let me know in the comments, would you want to see jetpacks make a return?